And I said, look, this is going to be the future. Uh, the technology will get better. We will figure out ways to use AI to build software. I want to be at the forefront of this. So let's figure out how to build a company that can use AI.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to be launching the Crowdbotics rebrand and really who this company is becoming and what our full potential is. And I am so excited to have on today our founder and CEO, Anand Kulkarni. And he's going to be answering some of the questions, some of the insights and things that led Crowdbotics to actually be. And I'm so happy to have him as a guest. We're going to be talking through a number of different topics, what he saw early on, what is the future, what does AI mean for all of this? So very happy to welcome him onto the show. Hello, hello. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How about yourself, Cory?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Enjoying a nice day here in Charlotte. And where are you at?
Beautiful and sunny Berkeley, California, just
Yeah,
across the bay from San Francisco.
awesome, man. Well, look, awesome to have you on. I'm so excited to be doing this. Crowdbotics, I think, is going through a massive kind of brand relaunch, a new focus, a new outlook, about tons of amazing stuff coming down the pike, and really, really excited to be able to kind of pick your brain to understand, what led us here, where is the future headed, what does AI mean, and all of this, and get a better kind of understanding from you, the person that started it all.
Hey, well, I'm excited to share the story. We don't often get to tell everyone about where everything came from. So it'll be fun to dive in and unpack some of the origins in a time when AI was very different, and how it led us to where we're going today.
Yeah, and like I always find this a great question to ask, any founder, anyone that started. But you know, what what led you to start Crowdbotics? Like, what was the insight? Like, what did you see going on that was that kind of light bulb moment of like, oh, we can, or I can disrupt this, or I can kind of help pave the way of where the future is going.
Okay, so let's go to the ancient days of 2016 when AI was really not a hot field like it is today. Uh, I was reading a paper at the time by this guy, Andrej Karpathy, who was then just out of Stanford, called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Recurrent Neural Networks. And he showed that you could use neural networks to make something that looked almost like code. Not quite code, but almost like code. And I said, look, this is going to be the future. Uh, the technology will get better. We will figure out ways to use AI to build software. I want to be at the forefront of this. So let's figure out how to build a company that can use AI to automate big parts of the software development lifecycle. So it turns out, of course, character by character code generation is tricky. It's interesting, it's doable, but it's tricky. There's a much more important and equally valuable problem that you can solve, which is the question of how you can staple apps together from big components, building blocks, parts, that is much more tractable. So we set up a simple service to collect data about how to build software, requirements, libraries. You find, unsurprisingly, about 80% of the things people want to build can be built from the same basic parts. So things like authentication flows, application components, databases, DevOps pipelines, even sophisticated things like vision APIs. They're all expressed these days in open source libraries or modules. And if you know what those modules are, if you know what those modules do, you can build intelligent systems that staple those together and automate big parts of building software. So back in 2016, we launched the company Crowdbotics to try and figure out ways to automate big parts of turning ideas into formalized requirements, and then turning those requirements directly into code, running code that people can use. And doing so, you can automate big parts of the software development lifecycle.
Got it. And that's interesting, right? So did you like is the idea, or did you see breaking up this concept of going from idea to spec, right? And then spec to code, as kind of a bridging, or like a one click up solution of being able to maybe one day be able to go directly from idea to code.
So yeah, it's funny you ask this. When we first launched the very first version of what is now the Crowdbotics web application, we had a good insight that language was going to be the most important part, that you would be able to reduce ideas into specs as an intermediate step before going from specs to code. Um, and if you look at the very first version that we built, it was actually a product inside Slack, the chat app. Why? Because we said, well, this is where people are describing and talking about what they want to build. Can we capture what they're describing? Can we analyze that text and turn it into requirements, figure out what those requirements are, and then match those up against libraries or components that we can then stand up, scaffold, and deploy. But that middle step turned out to be quite profound. We found out a lot of people aren't really spending a lot of time thinking about how to analyze and understand requirements properly. And that's often where the difficulty is for software development. If you're looking at where projects might fail or projects or software initiatives struggle, it's not that the devs couldn't build it, it's that the business side of an organization and the software side of the organization couldn't agree on what was supposed to be built. And everyone who's built software has had this experience. The hardest part is figuring out what people really want. So that's why we talk about these two steps, idea to spec or idea to product requirements as the first important step. If you can get a formalized representation of what you're trying to build, you can do a lot more than if you try to say, let's just turn language straight to code. That reductive step in the middle to say, let's define an abstraction that is more precise than just a description or a drawing, but not as precise as code, gives a really good middle ground for groups who are trying to understand how to properly explore the design space of a new application and the risk and the opportunity space of the application. So that's been an old idea at Crowdbotics. I think, of course, these days, we've embodied that really well in the way that people use the product today.
And that idea of addressing the inherent growth or maturity, right, of where I think software engineering is going by starting at the front, I think is something a bit profound and where I don't think a lot of attention was kind of ever given, right? In this concept of like shifting left and looking at code reuse rather than just kind of the IT problem, but actually there's this big kind of, hairball at the front, and that a lot of times if we can fix on how people go from idea into spec and then standardizing that somewhat in some way and being able to link it is the kind of solution to it, or maybe not solution, but the step in the right direction, right? And if
Like, I think this is one of the great insights that we've had around the code ops process. You like to say that the way we capture requirements hasn't changed in 30 years. And while we've had great innovations in the software development side of things, and where's our abstraction layers, how do we actually create code, how do we carry out the practice of building high quality software upstream of this in the actual requirements process, people really haven't been paying attention to the fact that there's all this data that you can take advantage of to improve the way that people build. Of course, in an AI era, that data is fed into a large language model to be processed and analyzed at scale. And you can do some very profoundly interesting and effective things to change the way that you build software. Just by thinking about the formalization of requirements into formal data structures and mapping those requirements systematically against the way that your organization builds software.
And so you mentioned something there around code ops. I hear the ops side, right, and then the code side. But for anyone that hasn't heard about code ops yet, how do you explain it? What is this thing that is called code ops?
Yeah, sure. So people talk a lot about DevOps and DevSecOps, which are the processes that systematically examine and explore how to increase efficiency or efficiency and security when you're building software. CodeOps is the idea, the movement really, of using AI systematically in the product development, planning, and implementation process when you're building software at scale. So obviously, everyone is excited about the potential of how you can use AI in software development, but the practicality of what that means can range from solutions that address a really tiny point problem, solutions like copilots that try to help you co-write, all the way up to complex AI tools that try to knock off test case generation or pull request generation. CodeOps is a systematic framework for thinking about how you incorporate AI into the software development process. We talk about three big legs on this stool. in code ops. The first is AI-based product planning. Can you use natural language processing and historical artifacts to speed up the way that your organization plans an application or a software initiative by looking at everything that has been built before in the world and everything that is built inside your organization to build software more effectively? The second is, once you've got that plan, how do you systematically inform that plan with historical code that has been built inside your organization, or libraries, components, and modules that exist inside repositories out in the public open source ecosystem, inside vendors or APIs, or inside your own company's historical repositories to figure out what the right pathway is to build software. And then, of course, you jump into the actual code base, go and implement using tools like GitHub Copilot, or similar systems that speed up individual developers. But it's a holistic approach. How do we think about building software from the planning perspective using AI, from the selection of architectural components and provisioning those components using AI, and then actually the last mile of development using developers who are augmented or accelerated by AI tools? It's a different and powerful way of thinking about how to build software using the advantages of AI today.
And you mentioned something there that I think some people would, I don't want to say like tinfoil hat it, but you mentioned a good part around reusing code that was already there, right? And I've heard some people take the mindset of, well, AI is just going to be writing all the code in the future, so why even reuse the stuff that you have when you can just let the AI go do it? So why is that such a big pillar, and what's important about reusing what's there versus just kind of generating everything net new when you have a new project?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I think that if you've used a lot of tools like Copilot, you know both the power of these tools and the limitation of those tools. Really, if you are using something like an AI code generation system to generate 100% of your code and expecting you're going to get durable and robust results, well, that's not really plausible. There's complexity limits and understanding limits in how well those systems can actually take requirements and translate them precisely into working finished code. And it's more commonly the case that if people are building software, they should be taking advantage of systems that have been built before. And this is the reality for how all organizations build today. You are making use of your organization's own authorized libraries and components. You're making use of good open source components or systematic libraries that have been authorized for use to speed up the process. And it doesn't really make sense to use AI to write your basic web framework, to write your front-end components. It really makes sense to use AI for what it's good for, which is augmenting the acceleration process for an individual developer when they write code, or figuring out which libraries and components you should be using, and then putting those together. So code reuse lets you build faster, it lets you use AI appropriately, and it lets you focus just on the parts that are really interesting when you're building software. Not writing every single piece from scratch using AI, but looking just at the bits that are unique, different, important for this application to be built from scratch.
Gotcha. No, that makes total sense. And if I think back to the millennia ago of when I was an engineer full time, I don't know if I ever even thought about or looked at writing code as something of really writing code as almost like an appreciating asset rather than a depreciating asset. A lot of times it was just writing it for that one use. But I think if you kind of turn it on its head a little bit and think about, hey, if you are writing something you can reuse, this actually does really affect the organization or any company across the board of being able to build stuff faster, build more stuff, right, for less, be able to innovate quicker. And I think that's a really bright future. Maybe not to sound corny or anything, but I think it's very, very cool.
Well, practically speaking, I think it works in practice, right? So what we talk about for organizations that implement a code ops strategy is that you get to something like 70% automation within 2 years. 70% is enormous. That means 70% of the code that folks end up building for new applications is coming off the shelf out of historical existing code. And if you know how most applications are architected, it shouldn't be super surprising, right? We've all got containers, frameworks, API wrappers that we like to save and reuse. It's just most of us don't do this systematically. In many cases, staring at a blank IDE or running an initializer as opposed to building a system that will systematically go and find the parts we need and make use of them. And that 70% savings is massive. It's time to market reductions. It's letting engineers focus on the stuff that matters and is most interesting. And it makes the organization love their software development process again, which is often a part that is the trickiest to make happen.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Like, so if if you look at all of this, like, what are the hard things that Crowdbotics is doing, right? Like, what do you find as some of the big challenges and therefore kind of like innovations
Yeah.
that's going
Great
on?
question. Okay, so look, it's very interesting because the landscape has shifted so much in the last 2 years in terms of market sentiment. When we talked about AI-based software development as a problem, um, before about 2 years ago, nobody believed us. We were actually one of the first commercial users of GPT-3 from OpenAI. And when we showed people the tool, they would say, "Wow, this is fake," or this can't be sort of really important, right? It's going to break down." And look, we had an early insight that this was going to become the primary way that people would build software and provide radical advantages. These days, of course, not only do people believe, understand it, um, we get to remain ahead of the curve. So the stuff that we're thinking about doing these days, the places where we are at the frontier, are places where the rest of the market isn't looking yet. So we were one of the first solutions that actually maybe still the leading solution that handles requirements creation, management, automation, systematic software de-risking at scale, understanding time, cost, and budgetary trade-offs when building software, all based on historical crowdsourced information, which is something that we're out in front on, which is exciting. Some of the places that look very interesting from my point of view to look next are elements where organizations can think about importing increasingly large segments of historical artifacts into the material that they are analyzing and preparing with Crowdbotics. So today, Crowdbotics customers, of course, construct private module catalogs, which are repositories of things that they have built in their organization before. Most of that is code. So we built these legacy software applications. We're going to ingest them into Crowdbotics and then start analyzing them and pulling out useful assets, understanding what is reusable, what is not. But we've also got this vision that we can pull in everything that an organization has. So think images, documents, pieces that are useful for them as artifacts in the software creation process that can be used to inform how the organization should be building software the next time through. And those are some of the interesting questions that we get to work on and analyze. Really, the vision for us is getting organizations to CodeOps Nirvana, where they are able to plan and launch applications in a radically more efficient and effective manner with information at the platform's fingertips about everything that organization has available to them in terms of resources, vendors, APIs, code assets, document assets, and more that'll assist in making effective decisions in how their next software initiative will run.
That's my next question was going to be like, so what is the future for Crowdbotics? But I think you kind of answered it. So it's going beyond even the code side, and I think you said it there. Like, what other assets get pulled in during software development, and a lot of those too, I think, go really, really unnoticed, mostly because people just don't pay attention. But stuff like beyond even requirements documents, but other documents that get passed around, like images, how does design and all of these other things really blend into the process and kind of reaching that nirvana state of code ops. But if you take a step back and someone were to ask you, Well, I guess someone is asking you, but if I were to ask you, what is, what is something that you like, what is like one thing that you are really, really excited about, kind of coming around the corner, and it could be, within Crowdbotics, it could be not in Crowdbotics, but I will limit it to the tech space as a whole. Like, what is something that you're just kind of sitting there waiting, like, this is really cool. I'm very excited to see this change.
So look, AI is a paradigm shift, similar to the advent of personal computing, the advent of the web, the advent of mobile. It is a dramatic transformation and a chance to reinvent how we are building software and really how humans are interacting with computers. That creates lots of surprising opportunity to make dramatically more accessible, available, and powerful software. And it also empowers a lot of people who were more auxiliary to the process in software creation, like domain experts, people with unique information about the world, to go and play a leading role in the creation or participate actively in the process of turning ideas into specs and specs into code, to bringing software to life. That's a powerful shift. And that's actually one that I think realizes a long-standing vision for not just Crowdbotics, but for the software creation movement, which is how do you reduce the barrier? How do you empower the biggest possible group of people to become creators inside organizations, which is very cool. I think practically speaking, of course, inside the Crowdbotics platform, I am jazzed about some of the coolest features that we have just around the corner. We've got technology for analyzing risks on software initiatives, which is a profoundly powerful and difficult problem to solve with AI. But it turns out with the data sets we've got, we can take advantage of that to tell you, here are likely places where this approach may succeed or fail. Here are the possible risks to think through and the opportunities to think through, which is such a different way of thinking about software products. Most tools that we use in software creation, Jira, our IDEs, they are concerned with the how of building software, meaning the mechanical steps that we are taking, but they don't concern themselves with the why of building software, which is always some purpose for the world, for our business, for our organization, for our own visions. And that why is the part that our tools should be helping us with, telling us places where the initiative can go wrong, telling us places the initiatives can succeed, giving us ideas for features or functions that give us bigger opportunity to scale. That's one of the features that I'm most excited about within Crowdbotics, and one of the powerful places where we've been able to change the way that people think about software creation using a code ops approach.
I see. Yeah, the answer, like the why portion is really compelling, and like I don't know if I've ever thought about a tool explaining the why to me for a lot of these things, and I think that I would love to pick your brain more on it at some point or in a future video.
Well,
But
we'll look forward to that.
I don't want to take up too much of your time today. Thank you so much for doing this. We are very excited to see all of the new features coming out and seeing the new brand relaunch, which is going to be super exciting as well. Already rocking some of the preliminary swag. So happy to
Great
have that
logo. Yeah.
early
Uh,
on.
we'll see it everywhere soon.
We'll see it everywhere soon. But if anyone wants to follow you, to check you out more, is there a good place for them to do that? Like X, Twitter,
Absolutely.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, the best place is actually not X, except for one particular location. The Crowdbotics blog is the most simple way to figure out updates on Crowdbotics and follow along. My own content shows up there quite frequently. You can also follow Crowdbotics on X or Twitter, depending on how you think about it these days. And we post the latest and greatest over there as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it so much. So until next time, thank you for stopping by, and look forward to the next update.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
See ya. And that is Anand Kulkarni, the founder of Crowdbotics. We covered a lot of good stuff today. I'll put links to everything down in the description below. So if you want to check out more, then you are more than welcome to. If not, thank you for coming by, and we will see you on the next video. And with that, Keith, go ahead and roll the outro.